Thank you, Ralph, for this introduction. So indeed, I will talk to you today about machine learning and news media, and also subjectivity. How can we detect subjectivity, and what is subjectivity in the news media with a multimodal approach. First of all, I want to apologize because, as Bruno, as you see, I'm using a PowerPoint, and it will be even worse because most of what I'm going to say is actually written on the slide. So it's a bit like if you were watching a movie in English with the English subtitles, which is something I'm actually doing anyway. As a preamble, does this work? No. Yes. I want to highlight that it's really an ongoing interdisciplinary teamwork. So it involves different disciplines. As Ralph said, I have an engineering background. I'm only recently diving into more social sciences. So the research project I will present deal with journalism and media studies, obviously, but also natural language processing and linguistics, and also obviously computer vision. And it's also a teamwork. We have some kind of informal interdisciplinary research group at UC Louvain with two PhD students, Louis Escoufler and Jérémy Bogart. Louis Escoufler provided some results I will show you, and some of the slides as well. And also discussion with my colleagues Cédric Ferron, Marie-Catherine de Marnay from the linguistic department, and François-Xavier Standard from the engineering department. So you see that it's a real interdisciplinary teamwork, a work in progress. So a bit of context first. The news media is increasingly multimodal. This is something I think everyone knows. So the information formats are increasingly based on different modalities, image and text obviously, but also video and audio, and it's also seen actually in the way media groups are converging. We have the Belgian Public Service, RTBF, that is publishing more and more written articles. We have a news press like IPM or Rossel in Belgium that are merging with audiovisual groups. So this is also something we observed at a corporate level, I would say. And this multimodal shift has only recently infused in the media coverage and framing analysis, because it has been historically more focused on textual information, and it's only recently shifting to a multimodal approach. Another part of the context I would like to highlight is also something I think everyone is aware of, is that we are in a period of information disorder, polarization, and mistrust in news media. For instance, I show here an excerpt from the digital Reuters report, the digital news report from 2021, showing that actually the press, the trust in what we call the press, is lower compared to many other institutions in society. So with scientists, military, police, courts, national government, and so on, and you have the press at the lowest position of the scale. Of course, there are many causes involved in this situation, among which the rise of digital platforms is certainly important. We have more and more people, especially the young people, that are getting their information, their news on such platforms. So you have a strong you have the news media, that are starting to lose their role of information gatekeepers. You have plenty of different information that are somehow mixed, and you have an unprecedented competition between all kinds of information, whether it be verified news information, disinformation, misinformation, irony, advertisement, entertainment, whatever. So you have plenty of reasons to explain this situation of mistrust in news media. But what is interesting is that still in the same report from the Reuters Institute, it's to observe a bit what journalists and audience talk about when they talk about trust in news. And so you have this is the results of one of their inquiry, and you see that plenty of for many of the reasons for mistrust is actually related to some kind of subjectivity or opinionatedness. I don't know if it's English, but anyway, you get the idea. The partisanship. So you have bias and impartiality, polarization and partisanship, representing communities fairly, which is also related to some kind of bias in the way you represent communities, emotional impact of news, sensationalism and clickbait. So these are all somehow related to subjectivity or partisanship. So we have multimodal news media that are increasingly suspected to be biased, partisan and subjective, or sold to the so-called grand capital, for instance. But how to define subjectivity? And actually subjectivity or objectivity or opinion are very differently defined depending on the discipline. From a purely linguistic point of view, subjectivity analysis often measures how much the author opinion is perceived in a given text. And it's based actually on the text itself. It's somehow self-contained. We analyze words, sentences, punctuation, and we determine if we are able to perceive the author opinion in this text. But in the field of journalism studies, it's a bit more complex because subjectivity analysis, it goes actually beyond a self-contained text analysis because it should also involve some kind of bias analysis or stereotypes analysis over time, over a long period of time for many articles, for instance. It should also, of course, include multimodal content analysis, so text obviously, but also images. And maybe more importantly, subjectivity in journalism studies has to take into account what is shown, so the text or the image, but also what is not shown. And this is the agenda setting theory. So the news are actually indicate actually what to think about. This is the agenda setting theory. And also how is it shown, and this is the framing theory from Goffman in 74. So not only what to think about, but also how to think about different topics in the news. So subjectivity is actually inherently present in the journalistic process, and objectivity is actually a very controversial journalistic ideal. Many people say, yeah, journalists have to be objective. Of course, it's a norm, it's a goal. But actually, objectivity is. I would be tempted to say that it even doesn't exist. And as to quote Wesley Lowery, who is a former Washington Post reporter, he urged journalists to replace the appearance of objectivity as the aspirational journalist standard with simply, I would say, being fair and telling the truth as best as one can based on the given context and available facts, and drop this idea of objectivity, because he pointed out that no matter how much we somehow fetishize the idea of objectivity, it always requires a series of pyramid of subjective decision making, and this is more related to the way the news media are framed actually, and we will be more talking about news frames in the following, on subjectivity and news frames. So based on this introduction, the research goal is of our project is to evaluate if and how automated tools can help analyze subjectivity in multimodal news. And I will proceed in 3 steps. The 2 first steps are more related to natural language processing and a focus on how to evaluate and analyze the linguistic subjectivity based on handcrafted features and language models, and in a second step, how to analyze the bias and the stereotypes in the press articles. And in the third step, we will see how we can go from these natural language processing steps towards automated news frames analysis based on multimodal transformer models. And I will explain in a minute what is a multimodal transformer model. I just want to highlight that the ultimate goal is not to prove that news media are subjective. We already know that they are subjective, but rather to try to quantify subjectivity, to detect it, even if it's, for instance, hidden behind a linguistic objectivity, because we have seen that linguistic subjectivity is just a part of the journalist subjectivity, and to propose tools to maybe better contextualize information for citizens or give insights to journalists. So the first step is to evaluate the linguistic subjectivity in the French written news press. It's a research project currently ongoing. I will not go into too many details, but I can certainly explain anything during the Q&A session if needed. The important thing is that we adopted a dual approach. So we started from 10,000 news and opinion articles from FTBF, the Public Broadcast Service. And on one side, we decided to design handcrafted linguistic features, both syntactic, lexical, stylistic, so the amount of I pronouns, for instance, or we, the amount of negation words, or the words that are expressing an emotion or an opinion, or the kind of punctuation that is used. So this is what I call handcrafted linguistic features, based on the words and the sentences in the article, and we get a performance a distinction between opinion and information of 90%, which is already something. And the big advantage of this system is that it's very explainable. So we are able to say, yes, okay, it has been classified as subjective because we find a lot of I and a lot of quotation, question marks and this kind of thing that indicate some kind of opinion. And on the other side, we decided to use a language model. I don't know if you already heard about such kind of models that are called BERT or Camembert in French, which is these are all based on transformers. I will talk about it in a minute. And we have trained a language model on this specific classification task, and we get a performance of 99%, which is much better than our handcrafted linguistic features, but with an explainability very low. And this is related to what has already been said in previous talks, is that we have machine learning models that are giving us very good results, but without being able to explain why. So transformers are like a black box, so we have very good results, but we don't really know how the system has managed to get these results. And the goal of this research is to combine these two approaches to obtain an algorithm that is both performant, so the performance of the machine learning, and explainable with the explainability of the handcrafted features. And to do so, and I will not dig into too many details, we have built what we call attention maps, which means we have developed system to try to identify on which words do influence the most the result given by the algorithm, whether it be the handcrafted algorithm or the machine learning algorithm. And this is really an ongoing process, and we want to see if there are similarities or if they are focusing on different words, and try to somehow combine these two approaches. And this is what we are going to do in the following ones. We will compare approaches to create a new model that is performant, explainable, and computationally cost-saving. And we are also in the process of adding a human annotation stage. So we will have the handcrafted feature, the machine learning model, and an experimentation with humans. And we are going to ask them to point what do they think is subjective in a given text. So that was the first step. The second step, remember when I was talking about subjectivity, there was this inherent subjectivity that you find in the text, but in journalism it's wider, it's broader than this, and you want to be able to analyze bias and stereotypes over time and see how bias and stereotypes can be detected in a bunch of articles. And for this, we use again language models. And for you to better understand how it works, I will give you a small example of how language models work. And it's important because actually you will see that for images, be reassured, I will talk about images. For images, actually language models, the way the language models work can be applied to images as well. And that's the funny part at the end of my talk. It's a spoiler. So, for instance, we have the word bank. How do we understand the meaning of the word bank? So, it actually depends on the context. Because if you have the sentence, I arrived at the bank after crossing the road, you all know that we are talking about something like that, okay? Commercial with where you can get money, okay? But if you have this sentence, I arrived at the bank after crossing the river, of course, you are more on this kind of things, okay? Well, these are not the best representation of river bank, but anyway, you get the idea. So the meaning, and this is really the central idea of language model, the meaning of a word is determined by its context. So you shall know a word by the company it keeps. It's a famous quotation in linguistics. And based on this idea, words are actually represented in a vector space. So from a large corpus of text, the machine learning algorithm learns the meaning of words from their context of appearance. So from the words around each given word, you will learn the meaning of each word. So each word is represented by a vector with its context, and the vector space obtained makes it possible to establish semantic relations between the words. So I have several examples here, and the interesting part is that you see, for instance, that the difference, the vector difference between king and queen is actually the same than between man and woman. Okay, so if you have queen and you remove woman and you add men, you will get the vector of king. Okay, so it's a bit it seems magical, but actually it's the way it works. You will represent words in a vectorial space, and the position in the vectorial space is related to the meaning of the word and of the word. And it's the way language models are working. Where it becomes interesting is that you can use language models for many applications, translations, generation of text. We talked about GPT-3 earlier today. So these language models, you can use them for many applications, but actually you can also use them for bias analysis. And it's something that is not really investigated because research has mostly focused recently on ways to neutralize these built-in biases. Because you wanted to translate or generate text without bias. But actually, as language models are learning based on millions of texts that we are giving to the model, it actually reproduces the bias of our society. So it's also a very good tool to actually analyze the bias that we found in our society, which is very interesting in a social science perspective. So, for instance, we have this graph where we try to see the professional occupations, the jobs that are more associated with women in the broadcast service in Belgium, in FTBF articles from 2010 to 2015. And the jobs that are more associated with men, okay? Based on this vectorial representation that I showed. And we see, of course, that it somehow reproduces expected biases, that we have sage-femme, bibliothécaire, sorry, the jobs are in French, concierge, chimiste, dentiste, psychologue, athlete, poète. All these jobs are more associated to a female environment, are closer to the word women. And on the other side, we have, of course, words like bourgmestre, ministre, diplomate. And note that these words are can be understood in both male-female perspectives, so it's the same word. Okay, so it's not related to the gender of the word itself. It's more closer from the men meaning. So it gives a way to analyze bias in our society. Another example is, for instance, by analyzing the proximity evolution of a given word with positive, negative, or anxiety-inducing concept, we get insight on how it was globally framed by the media over time. And we did an experimentation with Le Monde, Le Soir, and Le Temps, which are reference newspaper in Europe from France, Belgium, and Switzerland. And we see how the framing, the semantic context of the word vaccination evolved over time. And we have, of course, in 2020, some kind of disruption. And it's interesting to note that, for instance, Le Monde did actually frame the word vaccination with much more anxiety-inducing or negative concept, whereas Le Soir did put it in a much more positive context, which is not saying that Le Monde is anti-vax or whatever, but they just decided to focus on, they use semantic contexts that were more negative. Maybe they spoke more about anti-vax movement, even for refuting them, but they put them more in their editorial handling. Okay, so now you see a bit how we can use language model for biases study. And now the step 3, I still have some time, I'm looking at, yeah, okay. It's going from there towards an automated news frame analysis based on multimodal transformer model. So the transformer model, it's the language model I just explained. So it's the same kind of things. First, the news frame analysis. Actually, news frames can be understood as interpretive packages consisting of a central organizing idea that are used by journalists to communicate the most salient aspects of an otherwise complex story to a reader. And they can be detected by probing for particular words or visual images that consistently appear in a narrative and convey thematically consonant meaning across media and time. And I want to give this example. I'm sorry for non-Belgian audience, most of you. Actually, this research was somehow triggered because I saw the way political figures were somehow handled were treated in the Belgian, the French-speaking Belgian press. You have on the left the president of a party, political party, the Green Party, and on the right the president of the Liberal Party, Conservative Party. And it has been initiated by looking at these kind of things, where without being explicitly partisan, we have recurrent multimodal framing. Multimodal meaning both the title and the image in the news that implicitly induce some ideas or feelings about the topic being addressed. And analyzing this aspect becomes even more important as more and more people do not even bother anymore to read the article. More and more people are just looking at the image, the title, and they share it with their relatives, but they do not read the article. That could give them a more nuanced approach or whatever. But no, usually they read the title, they look at the image, they have already a feeling or an implicit opinion on what the article is about, and bim, they share the article. And so the idea, here for instance, there are different things to note. The title, for instance, in French, it's somehow a kind of complaint title, because we say that Brussels should do that, it's unfair. We should do that for Brussels, it's unfair. And on the other side, we have more an authoritative action, a quote from this president of the Liberal Party. And also, on the image side, there are study and literature showing that showing a person, the full body of a person, shows her in this case as less intellectual, I would say, non-intellectual qualities such as attractiveness or emotion, whereas on the right, having someone closer shows more intelligence and ambition. And I wanted to initiate a research on, okay, are there any trends that show that we always show this, this person in this kind of framing and always show this, this president in this kind of framing in order to somehow make emerge a certain kind of news framing. Okay? And the idea, because of my engineering background, is to look how machine learning can actually help automate news frame analysis. So one of the issues when we want to combine textual framing and visual framing is that visual do have specific properties that are both challenges and opportunities for such framing. For instance, there are three visual specific properties: the analogical quality, which is the association between images and meanings based on similarity of analogy. So we do not have we do not have to be familiar with a particular representational convention to understand an image. Okay, this is what is called the analogical quality. The indexicality, mainly for photorealistic image, which is somehow the implicit guarantee of being closer to the truth, because we have the feeling to see the truth because we see an image which is supposed to be the exact reflect of the reality. We all know that it's not the case. Of course, it can be very misleading, and especially now with the image generation and everything about deepfake. So indexicality. And the third property is the lack of an explicit propositional syntax. So claims like cause and effect relationships are not explicit in an image, and they are explicit in the text, and they are not explicit in an image. And based on these properties, Rodriguez and Dimitrova listed the different visual framing levels that can be addressed when analyzing visual frames. So we have the visuals as denotative systems, so it's really recognized object in an image, and it's usually linked to the caption and the text description. We have visuals as stylistic semiotic systems, so there we will analyze the stylistic conventions, the colors, the textures, the camera angle, the viewer position, the subject proximity. We saw in the previous image, one of the two subjects was much closer, these kind of things. Then visuals as connotative systems, so all the ideas, the concept or the symbols that are attached to the shown persons or object, and it's obviously subject to culture-bound interpretations. And the visual as ideological representation, which is the underlying principle which reveals the basic attitude of a nation, a period, a class, a religious or philosophical persuasion. And what we have, what can we do with automated tools? Actually, until now, we were able to partially automate with computer vision techniques these two first levels, the denotative systems and the stylistic semiotic system. We have plenty of examples of such kind of things. Here I show some of them with this image. Now we can automatically detect that we have a person, a frisbee, another person in front, even if it was blurred. So this kind of things is for a few years now can be done completely automatically. Here is another example of an image where we can recognize all the vegetables and fruits that are in the image. There are plenty of examples of these kind of things, and we can also, with more handcrafted features, detect the viewer angle, the camera position, these kind of things can be done automatically. But now, what about these two parts? These two parts are, it was hardly possible to partly automate them until the recent development of visual and multimodal transformers. So remember that I was talking about language models on NLP. Now, what is visual transformers? Visual transformers, it uses actually the same transformer architecture as the one used for natural language, which is already quite strange because these are not at all the same modalities, but it's very generic. And at some point, some researchers thought, let's use what we use for NLP, but for image processing. And they built a visual transformer. So instead of giving to the system words, they feed the system with small image patches. So they just divided the image in small patches and they give it to the system with some tweaks, obviously, but the principle is exactly the same. And they observed that with sufficient training image, and when I say sufficient, it's like more than 300 million image, so it's a lot, and you have to go to you have to be somehow Google to have access to this kind of image, and that raises interesting question for research funding, by the way. It understands the image and performs very well on usual classification tasks. So we use the same architecture that for NLP, and it gives very good result on usual image processing tasks. And now the interesting part, and by the way, this is somehow related to what Bruno said in your talk. This is what I was telling you just before, is that in my opinion, this is really the reflect of this arbitrary interpretation. So we have 0 and 1, we have an architecture. This architecture doesn't care if it's text or image or pixels, but trained with sufficient amount of 0 and 1, it understands the structures inside. And as we use the same architecture, we can actually build multimodal transformers. As NLP and visual transformers share the same architecture, it becomes possible to train multimodal model on image-text pairs. So we have an image encoder with all the image, the text encoder, and they somehow are matched into a big model, a big multimodal model, but that follows the same kind of architecture. And by doing so, we somehow link language and image understanding and further alleviate the challenge of lack of explicit propositional syntax in visual frames analysis, one of the 3 specific properties I was mentioning before. So what can we do starting from there? We have many perspectives actually, and by the way, this multimodal transformer is what lies at the basis of Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and DAL-E, all these things we were talking about this morning, that are really linking language and images. So some perspective from there and from the research question we had. The thing is that what was already possible with text is now possible with images, possibly combined with text. And I want to highlight something very important here. I'm not saying that images are reduced to words. We already discussed this before. But simply that this new kind of connection between these 2 modalities opens up very interesting new research avenue, especially in automation. Because we have a way to much better link the meaning of images and the meaning of words. Not saying that images are reduced to words, it's not the case, obviously. But among other things, we could work on the automation of the analysis of connotation, bias, cultural representation for a given topic. Remember that I was analyzing the gender bias or the positive or negative connotation of the word vaccination. We could actually starting doing the same with images, because we have some textual reference for these images, and we can try to see a given image, is it close from this kind of words or this other kind of words, and that can give a very interesting insight. We can also analyze the congruence, the connection of the way it fits. The congruence analysis between an image and an accompanying text. For news media, it's very interesting to see that if the text is actually congruent with the title, for instance. It's not always the case. It would be interesting to analyze these kind of things. Also, we would be able to find, based on the text, based on an article written by a journalist, find in a huge database the most suited image for this article. This is also the kind of things we could do with this kind of architecture. And the remaining challenge, which is a very important challenge, is obviously the explainability. What I said before is still true for multimodal transformer, even more because the models are bigger. We do not have the ability to really understand how these connections inside the model are made and why. We have already some progress. So this is a very recent, from September, results, where you have an image here from an elephant and a zebra, and the model is able to detect, to make the connection between the part of the caption of the image and the part of the image that is connected to it. So for instance, if you have this image with an elephant, it will highlight elephant, and it will automatically detect the elephant in the image. Same with zebra. So we have already some progress, but it's very, as I said, very preliminary results. It's from August or September, so we have still a long path ahead. And the idea, what we would like to do is apply the same things as in step 1, if you remember, to have this dual approach of combining handcrafted features and machine learning to try to keep the performance of machine learning but improve the explainability with some kind of manual tweaking, I would say. Exactly as we did in step 1 with the NLP. So, and I will, this is the end of the talk, just to say that the next practical steps at my research group is a research project called Multimodal Digital Monitoring, where we are currently developing tools to automate the multimodal news media monitoring and news frames analysis, both with collection and also the analysis part. Okay, and as a summary, I put some take-home message, as we say. So, about the context, we have multimodal news in a context of mistrust and strong suspicion of partisanship and subjectivity. Subjectivity in the news media is complex to apprehend and relates to news frames. Combination of handcrafted feature and deep learning models are a good path to reach both performance and explainability. And more importantly, language model, what I call transformers, initially built for natural language processing tasks, do generalize well with images and can be used as multimodal models, opening huge perspectives for the automated news frames analysis. So these are some of the key points of my talk, and I will end up with this very nice picture from DAL-E 2. So yesterday I was playing and I just put group picture of happy academic participants in a symposium on image and big data, impressionist painting, and this is the results given. So if you recognize yourself in the painting, just let me know. It was a bit disappointing, I must say, but I had no time to tweak the prompt. But anyway, it was my attempt. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonin, for this very inspiring talk, which stressed this importance of multimodality and frames analysis. That's very important indeed. So, as we did for the previous